I never thought my life would turn into something out of a twisted movie, but the night my father's wife told me she was pregnant with my child, I knew there was no turning back. Felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I stood frozen, staring at Vanessa, my stepmother, as she sat on the edge of my bed, her hands trembling. "Ethan," she whispered, eyes glassy with tears. "We have to leave. Leave." The word rattled in my skull. She wasn't just telling me she was pregnant. She was telling me that if we stayed, our world would burn to the ground. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 26, born and raised in a small town in Georgia where people judge you for the way you tie your shoes. I work as a mechanic, fixing up busted trucks for men who drink too much and pretend their lives ain't falling apart. My father, Dale Carter, is one of those men. He's owned Carter's auto shop since before I was born. Hardworking, respected, but emotionally distant. The kind of man who only knows how to express love by paying the bills and giving out tough lectures. Then there was her, Vanessa. She was my father's second wife, married to him for 6 years. She came to our town from Atlanta, and from the first time I saw her, I knew she didn't belong here. She was too elegant, too vibrant for a place that sucked the life out of people. At first, we barely spoke beyond the occasional pleasantries. She was just my father's wife. But that changed the night she showed up at the auto shop after closing time. I was under a truck, wiping oil off my hands, when I heard her voice. "Ethan, can you help me?" I slid out and saw her standing there, arms crossed, looking small under the shop's flickering lights. "What's wrong?" I asked. She hesitated. "My car won't start." I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Where's Dale?" She looked away. "Drinking with his friends." Of course. I followed her outside and popped the hood. It was an easy fix, just a loose battery cable. 5 minutes later, the engine roared back to life. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at me in a way that made my stomach tighten. I knew that look, and I should have walked away right then. But I didn't. 1 month later, it started with innocent conversations, too many smiles, too many accidental touches. Then, one night, while my father was away on a fishing trip, Vanessa knocked on my door. The way she looked at me, I can't explain it. I should have told her to leave, should have slammed the door and gone to sleep. But I didn't. That night changed everything. We spent weeks sneaking around, pretending we were just two people who made a mistake. But deep down, we knew the truth. There was no going back. And now, 3 months later, she was sitting in my bedroom, telling me she was pregnant. "We have to leave," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before anyone finds out." My heart pounded. I imagined my father's face if he ever learned the truth. Imagined the town's whispers, the disgust, the judgment. But running, leaving everything behind? I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Then I heard it. Footsteps outside my bedroom door, and a voice that made my blood run cold. "Ethan?" My father. I held my breath. The shadow under the door was unmistakable. My father stood just outside. My stomach twisted into knots as his voice came again. Firmer this time. "Ethan, you in there?" Vanessa's fingers dug into my wrist, her eyes wide with terror. If he opened that door, if he saw us together, if he noticed her red-rimmed eyes and my panicked face, it would be over. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to stay steady. "Yeah, I'm here." A pause. Then, "Come downstairs when you're done." Footsteps faded down the hall. I exhaled, but my body stayed tense. Vanessa buried her face in her hands. "Ethan," she whispered. "He knows, or he's starting to suspect." I shook my head, but deep down, I feared she was right. The next morning, I walked into town, hoping for some kind of escape from the suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. But something felt off. I passed Mrs. Langley's bakery, and she usually gave me a polite nod. This time, she barely looked at me. At the gas station, the old men who sat outside drinking coffee stopped their conversation as I walked past. Then, the worst part, when I stepped into the auto shop, my father barely looked up from the car he was working on. His silence was more unsettling than his anger would have been. Did he know? Had Vanessa said something? Had someone seen us? Paranoia dug its claws into me. That night, Vanessa called me. People are looking at me differently, Ethan. I swear I heard two women at the grocery store whispering my name. I clenched my jaw. We don't know that it's about us. She let out a shaky breath. We need to leave. I wanted to tell her she was being dramatic, that we could fix this. But could we? If my father found out, if the town turned on us, what kind of life would that be? And then the final straw. The next evening, I was locking up the shop when my father finally spoke. "You've been acting strange lately." I forced a chuckle. "Nah, just tired." His stare was sharp. "You sure that's all?" I nodded too quickly. He wiped his hands on a rag, eyes still on me. "You know, people in this town talk. And when they talk, they ruin lives." My pulse pounded in my ears. "What are you saying?" He took a slow step closer. "I don't know yet, but if I find out someone's betrayed me, they'll handle it my way." A chill ran down my spine. My father wasn't a violent man, but his anger was like a slow-building storm, quiet until it wasn't. I barely slept that night. By morning, I knew what had to be done. Vanessa and I had to run. We left in the dead of night. Vanessa had packed a small bag, just enough to get us through the next few days. She stood by my truck, her breath visible in the cold air, her hands trembling as she clutched her coat tight around her body. "This is insane," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "We don't even have a plan." "We can't stay, Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your father knows. Maybe not everything, but enough. And the town. They'll never let us live this down." She was right. I started the truck, the rumble of the engine feeling like a death sentence. This wasn't some teenage rebellion. This wasn't some mistake we could apologize for and move on from. This was permanent. As we drove past the quiet houses, past the streetlights flickering in the distance, I realized we weren't just leaving a town. We were leaving who we were. And there was no going back. We drove for hours, crossing state lines without a real destination. The radio played soft country songs, but neither of us spoke. The weight of what we had done, what we were doing, sat between us like an open wound. Vanessa stared out the window, her fingers resting on her stomach. Our child was growing inside her. The thought made me sick and exhilarated at the same time. "What are we gonna do?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. She exhaled slowly. "Find a place to start over. Somewhere no one knows us."
Ich glänzte her.
"And then what? Pretend this never happened?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Would that be so bad?" I didn't answer. We stopped at a gas station just outside Nashville. As I pumped gas, I felt eyes on me. Paranoia had already wrapped itself around my brain. But this was different. A man in a flannel shirt leaned against his truck, staring at me like he knew something. My heart pounded. Was he from our town? Did my father send someone after us? I forced myself to act normal, but as soon as we were back on the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. 3 hours later, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but when I saw the caller ID, Dad, my stomach dropped. Vanessa turned to me. "Don't pick up." But I had to. With shaky fingers, I answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then his voice, low, controlled but terrifyingly calm. "You think you can just disappear?" My breath caught in my throat. "Dad, I..." "Turn around, Ethan," he said. "Come home, before it's too late." He knew. He knew everything. And he wasn't asking. He was warning me. I ended the call and looked at Vanessa, my pulse racing. "He knows." She swallowed hard. "What did he say?" I gripped the wheel, staring at the empty highway ahead. "That we need to go back." The air between us was thick with fear. We had run. But for how long could we keep running before the past caught up with us? I tossed my phone onto the dashboard, my hands shaking. My father's voice still echoed in my head. "Turn around, Ethan, before it's too late." Vanessa sat stiffly beside me, her breath shallow. "What do we do?" I gripped the wheel so tight my fingers ached. "We keep driving." "But what if he finds us?" Her voice cracked. "What if?" I cut her off. "He already has. I glanced at the rearview mirror. The headlights behind us hadn't disappeared for the last 30 miles. Whoever was in that car was following us. Vanessa turned to look, her face going pale. "Oh my God. Don't panic," I muttered, my mind racing. It might not be him, but we both knew better. I pressed my foot on the gas, heart pounding as the speedometer climbed. The other car matched my pace. Vanessa gripped my arm. "Ethan, I know. We were trapped." I took the next exit, hoping to lose them on the backroads. My truck sped through the dark, winding streets of some town I didn't recognize. Vanessa kept looking back, her breaths coming faster. "They're still there," she whispered. The road was empty except for us and them. The streetlights flickered like something out of a horror movie. I spotted a gas station up ahead and made a split-second decision. I swerved into the lot and killed the headlights, parking behind the building. The other car zoomed past, their red taillights disappearing into the night. We sat in silence, barely breathing. "Did we lose them?" Vanessa asked. "I don't know." My voice was hoarse. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then, my phone vibrated. Vanessa flinched. I hesitated before picking it up. No caller ID. I answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then, a slow exhale. "You can't outrun this, son." A chill ran down my spine. My father wasn't in that car. But someone else was. He had people watching us. I ended the call, my pulse roaring in my ears. "We have to keep moving." Vanessa's eyes filled with terror. "Ethan, this isn't just about running anymore. He's not gonna let us go." She was right. Nowhere felt safe. We drove until the sun started creeping over the horizon. We ended up in some small Tennessee town, bigger than ours but not big enough to disappear in. We checked into a rundown motel on the outskirts. The guy at the front desk barely looked up as he handed me the key. Inside, Vanessa collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. I sat in the chair by the window, staring out at the empty parking lot. My father's words haunted me. "You can't outrun this." What did he mean? Would he come after us himself? Send someone? I didn't know. But I did know one thing. This wasn't over. Not even close. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the motel walls, every car that passed outside, made my body tense up. Vanessa lay curled on the bed, her face turned away from me, one hand resting on her stomach. Our child, our mistake, our future, and my father wasn't going to let us have it. I stared at my phone, debating whether to call him back. Maybe there was a way out of this. Maybe I could fix what we'd broken. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was no fixing this. At dawn, I sat in the chair by the window, watching the empty parking lot. Vanessa was still asleep when I heard it. A knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just steady. My breath caught in my throat. My father? Someone he sent? I moved slowly, gripping the handle, heart hammering in my chest. "Who is it?" Silence. Then, "Ethan." My stomach dropped. I opened the door, and there he was.
Dal Carter.
My father. He looked tired, older than I remembered. His face was blank, but his eyes, those cold, knowing eyes, burned into me. "Can I come in?" he asked. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Vanessa stirred behind me. She sat up, saw him, and gasped. His gaze flickered to her, then to her stomach, then back to me. "I just want to talk," he said. I let him in. What choice did I have? He walked past me, slow and deliberate, his boots heavy on the motel carpet. He glanced around, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the unmade bed. Vanessa sat frozen, her arms wrapped around herself. He pulled up a chair and sat down, looked straight at me. "You really thought you could run?" His voice was calm, almost amused. I swallowed hard. "We didn't have a choice." He nodded. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean you get to escape the consequences." I clenched my fists. "So what now? You gonna turn the whole town against us? Make sure we never have a life anywhere?" He let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "Ethan, you still don't get it, do you?" My jaw tightened. "Get what?" He looked at Vanessa again, and this time, there was something else in his expression. Something that made my stomach twist. Pity. "I'm not here to punish you," he said. "I'm here to tell you the truth." I frowned. "What truth?" He leaned forward, his voice quieter now. "You're not the first." The room spun. "What?" His eyes never left mine. "You think you're special? That Vanessa was just waiting for you?" He shook his head. "She's done this before. Twice." I turned to Vanessa, but she wouldn't look at me. "She gets bored," my father continued. "Finds someone younger. Someone stupid enough to believe she's trapped and needs saving." His lips curled in something almost like a smirk. "Then, when it all falls apart, she runs. Just like this." My chest tightened. "You're lying." He shrugged. "Believe what you want, but you weren't her first mistake, and you won't be her last." I turned to Vanessa, searching her face for some kind of denial, but she said nothing, just sat there, silent, guilty. My throat went dry. "Vanessa, tell me he's lying." She finally met my gaze, and in her eyes, I saw the truth. I had ruined my life for a woman who never planned to stay. My father stood up. "You can keep running if you want, but it won't change anything." He walked to the door, paused, and glanced back at me one last time. "Come home, Ethan, or do not. But this?" He gestured around the room. "This isn't the life you want." Then he left, and I was alone. Vanessa reached for me. "Ethan," pulled away, stared at her like I was seeing her for the first time. I had risked everything for her, and now I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to do. The end. What would you do in Ethan's shoes? Should he stay with Vanessa or go back home? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support keeps these stories coming. Let us know what kind of stories you want to hear next.